Tonight I'm telling a frontier tale forged by grit, treachery, and a kind of love only untamed land can carve into the human soul. It begins with a man shaped by violence and endurance, not only beneath open skies, but deep within himself. His name was Cade Apache, by blood and by spirit. Cade had drifted for years, selling muscle and skill for coin, never staying long enough to belong anywhere. When he finally spent the last of his savings, it wasn't on comfort, it was on distance. A worn-out ranch far from town. A place others had already written off. To Cade, it wasn't rotting wood or broken fences. It was a chance to finally claim ground beneath his boots. To build something solid in a world that had given him little except scars. He imagined quiet dawns, the creak of saddle leather, mesquite smoke hanging low at dusk. Peace carved from unforgiving soil. But peace on the frontier never lasts. Every fence line remembers something. Every house holds ghosts. And on this land, Cade was about to meet one. He didn't know her name yet. Only rumors had reached him, a woman cast aside, ruined by betrayal. A life emptied by loss. People said she stayed hidden, more shadow than flesh. But the frontier has a cruel way of pushing the broken into each other's paths. And Cade's first day on his land would place him directly in hers. This isn't just a story about a ranch or a man or a woman. It's about despair turning its face toward hope when two wounded souls dare to stand side by side. If this story stirs something in you, stay until the end and share your thoughts below. The valley opened wide and silent as Cade rode in that afternoon. The sun hung low, a burning coin pressed against the horizon. Dust and mesquite stung the air. His horse iron moved steady beneath him. Every step carried him closer to the land that now bore his name. To most men it was nothing more than a dying spread, too far from town, too broken to bother with. But to Cade, it was the promise he'd been chasing his entire life, peace. The ranch rose slowly out of the heat shimmer. A weather-beaten house stood, crooked gray boards bleached by years of sun and wind. It leaned like an old fighter who had taken too many hits, but refused to fall. The barn slumped beside it, roof-sagging doors hanging loose. Fences lay in jagged lines, work that would take months to repair. Cade studied it all with dark, measuring eyes. He saw strength beneath decay. Bones sturdy enough to live again. A place where no one ordered him to move on. No one judged his worth. This land, for better or worse, was his. But as he passed through the open gate, the silence felt wrong. Not peaceful. Heavy. Like something unfinished was holding its breath. Iron flicked an ear uneasy. Cade's focus snapped toward the barn. Something dark swayed inside the doorway, rocking in the heat. At first he thought it was loose canvas. Then his stomach dropped. A woman. Her body hung from a rope looped over a beam. Bare feet hovered inches above the dirt. A broken chair lay beneath her. One leg snapped clean. Nailed to a nearby post was a rough plank, smeared with a single word in black paint. Shame. Cade was out of the saddle before iron stopped moving. His boots struck the ground hard. A knife flashed into his hand. One clean slice, the rope snapped. She fell into his arms. Too light. Far too light. Her auburn hair threaded with gold brushed his arm as he lowered her carefully to the earth. Her skin was pale freckles, sharp against it. Her lips parted, but no breath came. Cade pressed his mouth to hers, forcing air into lungs that had already surrendered. His palm struck her chest once, twice, until a violent cough tore free. She gasped. Green eyes fluttered open. Wide. Lost. Then they sharpened on the stranger kneeling over her. "Go!" she rasped, her voice shredded raw. "You don't want to be here." Cade stayed where he was, solid as bedrock. "No one hangs a person on my land," he said evenly. And walks away. She stared at him, confusion colliding with bitterness. Her gaze slid toward the barn, the sign, knocking softly against the post, then back to the man who had cut her down. Her story was about to begin. He offered his hand. She paused, eyes searching his face, then finally placed her own in his. Her palm was rough, hardened by years of work, far stronger than he'd expected, from someone who'd just been cut down from a rope. When she rose, her knees wobbled. He stepped closer, steadying her until the ground stopped tilting beneath her. She wore a plain cotton blouse, threadbare and sun-bleached, a leather vest molded to her frame, and a work skirt faded by years of dust and heat. A revolver rested at her hip, its holster scarred and worn smooth from long use. "You're Evelyn Ward," he said. Her mouth tightened. "I was." Cade glanced toward the house. "Not anymore." A sharp, bitter laugh slipped out of her. "Not since Silas Crow sold it out from under me. The cattle, the tools, even the bed." Her jaw clenched. "Ran off with another woman." She swallowed hard. "Left me with nothing but this." Her voice cracked just once. "And when you've got nothing left, folks in town make sure you never forget it." Cade didn't ask her to explain. He'd seen enough to understand. "Come inside," he said instead. "You need water." The house smelled of dust and abandonment, the air stale from months of being left to rot. She drank slowly from his canteen, hands shaking as if they'd forgotten what it felt like to hold something steady. "Why here?" Cade asked quietly. "Why like that?" Her eyes dropped to the cup. "Because it was the last thing I had." She breathed out. "And they took that too. Once the last piece of yourself is gone, there's nothing worth guarding." Cade studied her in the slanted evening light. She stood straight even now, though her eyes carried a weight that would have broken most people. He'd seen that look before on battlefields, in fresh graves and souls forced to bury too much too soon. "This place is mine now," he said at last. "Bought it legal this morning." Her head snapped up. "So he can't take it back?" Cade shook his head slowly. "Not unless he tries to take it from me. And that'd be a mistake." For a brief moment, relief crossed her face, then fear followed close behind. "You don't know him." "I don't have to," Cade replied, voice calm. "You stayed when he ran. That makes this place yours as much as mine, if you want it." Silence stretched between them. Wind rattled the shutters. A coyote called from the ridge. Finally she whispered, "Why would you care? You don't even know me." He met her gaze without flinching. "Because someone once cared enough to keep me standing, and because no one hangs a soul on my land and walks away." Her shoulders loosened just a fraction. She nodded. "All right, I'll stay, for now." Cade rose and nodded toward the window where the old shame sign still swung clacking against the post. "Then we start with food. Tomorrow that fence." A faint smile touched her lips, tired, but real. As the last light bled out of the desert sky, Cade knew one thing for certain. Trouble was already riding their way. Night settled heavy over the ranch, thick with the scent of dry earth and the promise of distant rain. Inside the weathered house, a single oil lamp pushed back the dark. Cade sat at the table, hands resting on wood scarred by years of use. Across from him, Evelyn Ward cradled a chipped mug of coffee. She hadn't spoken much, since agreeing to stay, her green eyes following the wavering flame, as if expecting it to vanish and leave her alone again. Cade didn't push. He'd learned long ago that silence could be armor, sometimes the only protection a person had left. Instead, he asked quietly, "You cook?" A quick, sharp smile crossed her face. "When there's something worth cooking." He nodded toward the pantry. "Ain't much right now. We'll change that." Her eyes flicked up to him, doubtful, then drifted back to the cup in her hands. "You talk like you plan on staying," she said quietly. "I am," Cade replied without hesitation. $40 says I mean it. That did it. Something slipped loose inside her, something she hadn't felt in weeks. A laugh escaped her. It came out low, rough around the edges, like it hadn't been used in a while. But it was real. She blinked, surprised by the sound, then shook her head and pulled the mug, closer to her chest, as if the heat alone was holding her upright. The house groaned as the wind pressed against it, loose boards rattling in their frames. Without thinking, Evelyn's hand rose to her throat. Her fingers brushed the dark marks left by the rope. She froze, then dropped her hand quickly, pretending instead to adjust her grip on the mug. But Cade had already noticed. "You got family in town?" he asked. His voice stayed even. She paused. "No." Then after a breath, "Closest thing I had was Silas Crow." The name came out sharp, like gravel between her teeth. "He hasn't been a husband for a long time." Cade didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. Men like Silas were all over the frontier, quick to take, slow to give, and dangerous when they decided something they tossed aside still belonged to them. "You should know," Evelyn added quietly. "He doesn't let go. If he hears you bought this place, he'll come." Cade met her eyes, steady, unmoved. "Then we'll be ready." By morning the land smelled of dew and mesquite. Evelyn stood on the porch, her hair pulled back, pale light, sharpening the hollows in her face. Cade was already in the corral, working on a gate that leaned like an old drunk. His hands moved with purpose, the kind learned from years of fixing what others had broken again and again. She watched him a moment before stepping closer. "That won't hold," she said. He glanced up. "Then show me better." For the first time since meeting him, her mouth curved into something close to a smile. She took the hammer from his hand, squared the post with a steadier eye, and drove the nail home clean. The crack of iron rang across the yard. Cade gave a single nod, not patronizing, but respectful. The morning settled into work. They replaced boards, hauled water, swept away layers of dust that had settled like memories from another life. Each task was small. Each one stripped away decay, revealing bones worth saving. By noon, Evelyn had rolled up her sleeves. Dirt streaked her arms, sweat darkened her collar. The sight caught Cade off guard, not because she was weak, but because she wasn't. Despite everything, she worked without complaint. Her hands were tough. Her back stayed straight. The bitterness in her laugh eased, replaced by something firmer, resolve. When the sun slid lower, they shared bread and apples Cade had brought from town. They sat on the porch steps, chewing in silence, as the sky deepened into copper. Evelyn spoke first. "You didn't have to save me yesterday." Her voice was quiet but sure. Cade turned toward her, dark eyes steady. "I didn't have to," he agreed. "But I wasn't about to stand by while someone gave up." Her throat tightened. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." He leaned forward slightly, holding her gaze. "I do. My people were scattered when the army came, our land taken, families pushed into dust. I worked cattle for men who paid me in scraps and insults." He paused. "Every step since has been about proving I was more than what they said I was." Her lips parted, but no words followed. For the first time, Evelyn didn't just see a stranger who had cut her down from a rope, but a man carrying his own scars, different wounds, just as deep. The air between them shifted. Not love, not yet, but something took root: recognition. Two souls shaped by different storms standing on the same ground, standing in that same restless wind as evening settled. Evelyn Ward set a pot of beans over the fire. The smell filled the room, rich, earthy, comforting. Cade sat nearby, drawing a blade across his whetstone, the scrape of steel, slow and even. Outside, coyotes called across the valley, their cries rising and falling like a rough old hymn. Evelyn stirred the pot and murmured almost to herself, "Feels strange." "Eating with someone again," she added. Cade slid the knife back into its sheath. "Strange doesn't mean wrong." She looked at him, then really looked, and found no judgment in his eyes, just patience. A steady presence that didn't shy away from the broken parts of her. Later, when the dishes were cleaned and the fire burned low, Evelyn lingered by the window. Her reflection wavered in the dark glass. The bruises at her throat stood out under the lamp's glow. She traced them lightly, the shame still sharp. Behind her, Cade's voice came calm and sure. "You're still standing. That matters more than you know." She swallowed, turning from the glass. "And you?" she asked. "Why stay on land everyone else walked away from?" Cade's eyes moved over the walls, the patched roof, the floor worn thin by time. "Because it's mine. Because I chose it. And I'm done letting others decide where I belong." Evelyn breathed out slowly. For the first time in months, the weight pressing on her chest eased a little. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. He already understood. Night closed in around the ranch, carrying a fragile kind of peace. Two souls, both battered, both scarred, still standing. Not tied by love. Not yet. Bound by something older. Stronger. The refusal to bow, and in that fragile beginning, hope took root. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Evelyn spotted the rider cresting the far ridge. Dust curled behind him, glowing in the pale morning light. Even from that distance, she knew the shape of him, the hunched shoulders, the way he sat like a man forever braced for a fight. Her breath caught. Silas Crow. Cade stepped onto the porch, beside her rifle, resting easy in his hands. His eyes followed the lone figure cutting across the valley. "That him?" Evelyn asked, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes." The rider slowed near the gate, reining in hard. Silas's face was darkened by trail dust, and whiskey eyes, bloodshot mouth, twisted into something that might have passed for a smile if not for the cruelty etched into it. He leaned forward in the saddle, forearms resting on the horn. "Well," he drawled, voice rough, looks like the little wife found herself a new protector. Cade didn't move, didn't flinch. "This land's mine now," he said evenly. "Bought and paid for." Silas laughed low and ugly. "Doesn't matter. Everything here was mine first, including her." Evelyn's fists clenched, nails biting into her palms. Her voice cut sharp through the space between them. "I'm not yours, Silas. Not anymore." He ignored her eyes, fixed on Cade. "You think you can ride in grease a judge and take what belongs to me?" Cade lifted the rifle in one smooth motion, settling it against his shoulder. Gaze locked on Silas. "That's exactly what I did. Now you're trespassing." For a long moment no one moved. Wind whispered through dry grass, rattling the barn boards. Silas's hand twitched toward the revolver at his hip. Cade's rifle shifted, barrel steady, aim unshaken. "Don't," Cade said, his voice carrying across the yard like iron. Silas Crow went still. His eyes narrowed to thin slits. "This ain't finished," he snapped. "Maybe not," Cade replied evenly. "But it's finished for today." Silas spat into the dirt, yanked hard on Brim's reins, and turned away. The horse lunged forward, hooves pounding until the sound faded into the wide-open quiet. Evelyn Ward finally released the breath she'd been holding. Her shoulders shook. "He'll come back," she whispered. Cade nodded once, slow and certain. His eyes stayed on the horizon. "I know," he said, "and so will I." That night the valley felt different. The air pressed close, thick with anticipation, as if the land itself sensed danger circling. Evelyn stood at the window lamplight, trembling against the glass. Her eyes swept the distant ridges, searching for movement. It came sooner than she wanted. A faint glow flickered along the hills, bobbing against the dark. At first she thought it might be someone riding late, but the way it stopped, then moved, then stopped again. That wasn't the rhythm of a traveler. It was a lantern, watching. "Cade," she murmured. He was already there, knife set aside, rifle in hand. He joined her at the window, gaze narrowing on the distant light. "They're testing us," he said quietly, "checking if we're alert." Her stomach twisted. And if we weren't, they'd be closer. The light disappeared, swallowed by the hills, but the silence it left behind weighed heavier than gunfire. At first light, Cade paced the yard, eyes scanning the ground. Near the corral, he dropped into a crouch, fingers brushing damp earth. "Boot prints," he said, angled toward the barn. 2 men. Maybe 3. He followed the trail a few steps, then stopped, jaw set. "They came while we slept." Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. "Why didn't Ash bark?" "They didn't come close enough," Cade replied. "Just close enough to count doors." She swallowed hard. "So what now?" Cade straightened, rifle resting across his arm. His gaze swept the land, sharp, calculating. "We move first." The rest of the day passed in hard, focused motion. They worked shoulder to shoulder, fast but precise. Cade showed her how to set snares along the north fence where brush could hide a man creeping in. He rigged wire and bells inside the barn so no door could open without noise, loud enough to wake the dead. Sandbags were stacked beneath the front windows. Water buckets placed near every entrance. Each small action tightened the perimeter, turned the house into more than shelter. Evelyn watched him closely. His movements were calm, measured, and she understood he wasn't just building defenses. He was teaching her. Every nail he drove, every knot he tied, every choice he made, each one was a lesson. She wasn't just a woman left for dead anymore. She was part of the stand. That evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, they sat on the porch. Mesquite smoke hung sharp in the air. The silence stretched, but not the silence of strangers. It was the quiet of 2 people, listening to the land, waiting for a storm they both knew was coming. Far off against the dark line of hills, the lantern appeared again. This time it didn't stop at the ridge. It moved lower, closer. Evelyn's breath caught. Cade rose, rifle in hand, voice steady as stone. "They're not finished with us," he said. "Not yet." As darkness closed in, they both understood the truth. The fight for the ranch, for dignity, for a single shot at peace, had only just begun. The storm came hard out of the west. A solid wall of slate-gray clouds swallowed the horizon whole. Wind hit first, slamming the shutters, bowing the cottonwoods until their branches clawed at the sky. Then the rain broke loose, sharp, relentless, hammering the roof like it meant to scour the land clean. Inside the house, Cade fed another log into the fire. His rifle never left arm's reach. Evelyn Ward sat at the table, needle poised between her fingers, stitching a tear in her skirt. Still her gaze kept sliding back to the window. Lightning tore the night into jagged shards. Thunder followed, deep and violent. Her chest tightened. She had weathered storms before, but never one that carried the promise of armed men riding through the dark. The dog Ash stirred first. A low growl rolled up from deep in his chest. Cade's head snapped up. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling the rifle from the wall. "They're here," he said, calm but edged with iron. Evelyn dropped the needle. Her hands shook. "How many?" "Doesn't matter," he answered, already moving for the door. "Get the Colt." She grabbed the revolver. The weight felt strange but solid. His lessons rushed back. The stance, the sight, the feel of the trigger just before it broke. She swallowed and forced her breathing steady. Outside, shapes moved through the rain. 3 men, maybe 4, spreading across the yard, rifles flashing in the lightning, and in the center, unmistakable even through the downpour, Silas Crow. His hat sat low, his grin twisted with spite. His voice cut through the storm. "You really think you can keep her from me?" He spat the next words like a curse. "You think you can take what's mine?" Cade stepped onto the porch, rain streaming down his coat. His rifle rested easy against his shoulder barrel, shining white with lightning. "This land isn't yours, Silas," he called back. "And neither is she." The first shot cracked shredding wood inches from Cade's leg. In the same breath, his Winchester roared. The sound echoed across the valley. One of Crow's riders went down behind the trough, howling and clutching his arm. The fight was on. Evelyn crouched behind the sandbags, inside, heart pounding. A shadow lunged toward the side window, slipping through the rain. She braced the Colt the way Cade had taught her, sighted down the barrel, and squeezed. The flash lit the room. The recoil slammed her shoulder. Outside, a man staggered back, cursing into the storm. Her breath came fast, but her grip held. She had done it. The battle exploded in bursts of thunder and gunfire. Cade moved with practiced calm, every shot deliberate, every step measured. Evelyn matched him in her own way. Fear clawed at her, but resolve held her steady. Each time she pulled the trigger, each time the Colt thundered, she felt another piece of herself stitched back together. Silas's voice rose through the chaos. "Evelyn, you hear me. You can't hide behind him forever." Her answer cut sharper than gunfire. "I'm not hiding, Silas. Not anymore." Another shot tore through the room, splinters flying across the table. Evelyn ducked, then lifted her head, again eyes burning. She was no longer the woman who had stood beneath a rope ready to give up. She was someone else now, someone who fought back. The rain fell harder, washing blood into the mud, swallowing the shouts of Crow's riders as they scrambled for cover. Lightning tore open the sky. For a split second, everything burned silver. The barn, the corral, the hunched shapes crouched low in the storm. Cade's rifle roared again. Then once more. Another man collapsed at last. Silas Crow snarled an order through the rain. His men broke away, melting back into the darkness. The storm swallowed their retreat. Hoofbeats faded, leaving only the hiss of rain and the harsh sound of breath dragged from aching lungs. Cade lowered his rifle. His chest rose once hard, then steadied. He stepped inside water streaming from his hair, his eyes locking instantly on Evelyn Ward. She was still kneeling behind the sandbags. The Colt shook in her hands, smoke curling faintly from the barrel. "You all right?" he asked. Her hands trembled, but she nodded. I think I hit one of them." A small smile touched his mouth, rare gone almost as soon as it appeared. "You did fine," he said. "Better than fine." He crossed the room and crouched so their eyes were level. "You're stronger than you think." The words struck deeper than any bullet. She swallowed hard, her throat tight, the bruises there still tender. But inside her, something shifted. For weeks she had lived only to endure. Now, with the Colt still warm in her grip and Cade's steady gaze holding her, she understood she wasn't just enduring anymore. She was fighting for her life, fighting for whatever came next. The storm eased slowly. Thunder rolled away into the distance. Rain softened to a thin drizzle. The night settled into a tense, fragile calm. Together, they barred the doors, checked the windows, and banked the fire low. The house reeked of gunpowder and smoke, but beneath it lingered something else. Hope. Evelyn sat at the table, her body still shaking with leftover adrenaline. Cade poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and slid one toward her. She took it with both hands, knuckles white. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she lifted her eyes to his. "I thought I was finished," she whispered. "When you cut me down, I figured it was only a delay." She paused, searching for words. "But tonight I felt like I mattered again." Cade studied her, his expression steady, his voice low. "You do." The certainty of it settled into her bones like warmth returning after cold. Outside, the storm passed. The valley lay washed clean. Inside, 2 souls scarred by betrayal and loss sat side by side, no longer strangers, no longer broken in the same way. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn Ward believed there might be a tomorrow worth standing for. And Cade knew he would stand with her to face it. The valley grew quiet in the days after the storm, but it wasn't the peace they had hoped for. It was the kind of quiet that carried weight. A silence stretched thin, ready to snap. They both knew Silas hadn't given up. Men like him never did. So they worked. From sunup until the light bled out of the sky, their hands stayed busy. Cade cut timbers from the old shed to reinforce the barn doors and brace the lower windows. Evelyn hauled sandbags, her skirts caked with dust arms, shaking but unyielding. Together they ran tripwires along the north fence and hung bells above the doors so even the slightest trespass would scream a warning. Every nail driven, every board set. It wasn't just defense. It was defiance, a message to the land, to Silas, to themselves. They would not be broken again. In the evenings, Cade placed a Colt in Evelyn's hands and showed her how to hold it without fear. His voice stayed calm, his patience unbroken, as he adjusted her stance and guided her aim. At first her shots went wide, the recoil snapping the barrel against her grip. Cade never frowned, never mocked. He only nodded once and stayed beside her. Then he said it again, and she did it. Again and again until the crack of gunfire no longer startled her, until her shoulders settled into a steadiness she'd thought was gone for good. One evening, when her shot rang true against the tin they used for practice, she lowered the revolver and looked at him. There was a spark in her eyes, pride bright and undeniable. He gave the faintest smile. "Told you, you'd get it." It was in those hours, under a thinning sky, with the sharp bite of gunpowder in the air, that Evelyn Ward felt something shift inside her. Not just safety, but dignity. Not just surviving, but the first quiet bloom of power. In time, she began to share the memories she'd buried deep, the child she once carried, the dreams that died with that small silenced heartbeat, the long hush after Silas Crow left, the hollow ache that followed, the shame pressed into her by whispers in town. Cade didn't interrupt. He listened, his dark eyes steady as if every word mattered. And when she faltered, when grief tightened her throat, he said softly, "Out here, no one decides your worth but you. Not Silas, not the town, not anyone." The words struck her like a bell ringing clear through her chest. For the first time in years, she felt their truth. She wasn't just what had been done to her. She wasn't the rope, or the shame, or the wife left behind. She was Evelyn Ward, still standing, still fighting. Cade never called her strong. He didn't have to. His actions said it every hour, every day. In his steady presence, she found something she'd stopped believing in: respect. Not demanded, not traded. Freely given. No promises were spoken, no declarations made. Still the bond between them deepened. It wasn't love yet, not the kind written in letters or whispered in the dark. It was quieter, older, the kind that forms when two scarred souls recognize themselves in one another. That night, as coyotes cried in the distance and the lantern burned low, Evelyn stood at the window with the revolver resting in her hand. Her reflection wavered in the glass bruises, fading eyes sharper than they'd been in years. For the first time, she didn't see a woman left behind. She saw someone ready to face whatever came next. And she knew she wouldn't face it alone. Morning broke bright and hard, but the air felt heavy, as if the land itself were holding its breath. By midday, the dust rising on the southern horizon confirmed what they already knew. Silas Crow was coming back, and this time he wasn't alone. 4 riders thundered across the flats, rifles high, Silas at their head. His face was twisted with rage, his voice cutting through the pounding hooves. "You think you can keep what's mine? I'll burn this place to the ground before I let you have it." Cade was already on the porch, Winchester in hand, his stance calm and rooted. "This land isn't yours, Silas," he called. "And neither is she." The first volley tore through the air, bullets splintering wood glass, exploding inward. Cade answered with measured fire, forcing Crow's riders to scatter for cover. Inside Evelyn fed cartridges into his hand, fingers trembling but sure moving, with the rhythm of someone who'd decided she would not stand idle again. When a shadow lunged at the side window, she lifted the Colt braced the way Cade had taught her, and fired. The man stumbled back with a curse, retreating into the chaos. Evelyn's heart hammered, but she held her ground. She was no longer the woman who surrendered in silence. Not anymore. The fight exploded without mercy. Bullets hammered walls and doors, rifle fire rolling through the valley like thunder. Side by side, Kate and Evelyn Ward held their ground. Not as savior and helpless woman, but shoulder to shoulder. Two people carrying the same weight of survival and refusal. Then Silas Crow made his play. While Crow's riders kept Cade pinned down, Silas broke wide cutting around the barn. He struck fast violence in motion, snatching Evelyn by the arm and dragging her into the open yard. His pistol jammed beneath her jaw. His grin split wide, cruel and certain. "You think you've won," he spat. "She's mine. Always was. Always will be." Evelyn fought him, fury blazing in her eyes, but the cold steel bit into her skin. Cade stepped off the porch. His rifle was lowered, but steady. His gaze never left Silas. His voice came low, calm as rock. "You've already lost." Silas sneered. "Lost? I've got her right here." Cade shook his head slowly. "She was never yours. She belongs to herself. That's what you never understood." For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered in Silas's eyes. And in that breath, Evelyn moved. Her heel crushed down on his instep. Her head snapped back into his face. Silas staggered, the pistol slipping loose. In the same heartbeat, Cade's rifle cracked. The shot tore through Silas's shoulder, spinning him hard into the hitching post. The pistol flew from his grip, clattering into the dirt. Before he could recover, Cade was on him, hauling him upright, slamming him against the wood. The fury drained from Silas's face, fear seeping through the bravado. "This is your last warning." Cade said, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You ride out now, or you don't ride again." Silas's breath came ragged. His eyes jumped between Cade's rifle and Evelyn's unflinching stare. For the first time he saw what he'd truly lost. Not just land, not just power, but the woman who no longer shook at his shadow. With a curse, Silas stumbled to Brim, mounting with his good arm. His men followed, throwing glances back, their swagger gone. Dust rose as they fled hard into the distance, defeat trailing them like smoke from a dying fire. The yard went still. Evelyn's chest heaved. The Colt remained firm in her grip. Cade lowered his rifle, his expression softening as he looked at her. "You did it," he said quietly. "You stood." Her breath caught. Her voice shook but didn't break. Not alone. And with that truth, the last of Silas Crow's hold over her, shattered, carried away on the wind. The days that followed brought a stillness that felt almost unreal. No riders on the ridge, no gunshots echoing through the hills. Only the slow return of ranch life. Cade repaired broken fence lines, his hand steady against worn timber. Evelyn swept dust from the house, tended to the small garden behind the porch, and found herself humming without realizing it. It wasn't perfect peace. The land stayed hard. The work never ended. The scars on both of them were still fresh. But it was peace enough, the kind that asked for nothing except the will to keep standing. One evening, as the sun melted into copper and the first stars flickered awake, Cade and Evelyn sat side by side on the porch. They didn't speak of the past. They didn't reach for tomorrow. They didn't need to. Their silence wasn't emptiness. It was choice. Two souls bound not by ownership or promises, but by resilience, by respect, by the quiet knowledge that they had walked through fire and come out stronger. Above them, the night stretched wide, stitched with stars. And in that vast stillness, a truth settled in a land that never gave easily. They had built something together that could not be taken. Not by guns, not by shame, not even by the past. Thank you for staying with this story. If it moved you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments and to subscribe so more stories like this can find their way to you. And if someone you know needs a reminder, that hope can take root, even in the harshest ground, share this story with them. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work